Na zdrowie, comrade. And what glorious day it is. For today I get to talk about the Jewish leaders of glorious proletariat revolution. In fact, this is the only time I will have list of main characters who are only Jews. Yes, 5 main characters, minus villain, which is Tsar, of course. You have Julius Martov, the leader of the Mensheviks, Vladimir Lenin, leader of the Bolsheviks, Leon Trotsky, started his own faction, then became Bolshevik leader, very important man, Kamenev, deputy, and pretty much Lenin's secretary or whatever blows in aide-de-camp. Zinenev, aide-de-camp of Lenin. Now, before I get into main episode, I want to have a fun, well, not so fun, but important discussion about sources. My sources are mostly Marxist.org or Marxist International Archive. Despite them being the same thing, it's complicated. Which means they're biased. They're Marxist, but they're also very good. They have 9,000, yes, 9,000 and more transcripts from Marxists or works Marxists are based off of. In fact, you can get Sun Tzu's The Art of War, despite being him from China, thousands of years before communism was even invented. It's a fun place to check out, and I definitely recommend. Now, another interesting thing is, I don't have a main character. I have 5, as said earlier. That means that I'm going to be doing this more chronologically than before. So instead, I shall start this off by giving a rundown of each one and, well, before they get into major things. First, Julius Martov. He was actually born not in Russia, but in Constantinople to a middle-class family. He is fully Jewish, raised Jewish, and both of his parents are Jewish. Then you have Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Not his real name, but interestingly enough, both of his parents were kind of Jewish. Dad converted to Christianity. His mom was half Jewish, but raised Christian. Now, here's a fun thing I figured out learning. Dad was really into raising his kids Christian on the outside. That's kind of an important thing to bring up. His mom, who was half Jewish and obviously knew it, was raised Christian, didn't really care. Also, Lenin had a brother who tried to kill a Tsar. Not the same Tsar that will end up being our enemy, good comrades, but Alexander III. He failed and was executed. This is actually part of what led to Lenin's thing. Trotsky, full Jew again. He was raised, I'm not sure if it was a full settlement, but in an occupied place. His family could move, though they only moved to Jewish majority places. Kamenev, he had a Jewish railway father who would help put him through the entire thing. And you have, lastly, Zinenev. He was born to Jewish dairy farmers. So now I want to start things off. Start things off in the most, well, Soviet way. A famine. One in 1891, so not the Soviets' fault. This was a terrible famine, completely mismanaged by the Tsar, killing anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million, some even say more. And why is this important? Because this is where the person who started this all off, and most forgotten one, Julius Martov, begins. He falls into a socialist rhetoric. Socialist rhetoric turns to communism. By the way, I'll be using those terms interchangeably for this. They're not. It's complicated. You could go to an entire different video, and it's 4 hours long on the difference and not even start to begin it. But what does he do? Where does he go? The Leningrad, well, St. Petersburg at the time. Lenin hasn't really been famous enough to do it. But who does he meet there? But Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. He reads what is to be done. He completely goes into the communist mindset, and he finds something to do. So they form our first major organization. Well, I'll put a pin in that later. Jewish Bund actually is more major and way more important and done first, but not to the story. Okay, tangent over. It's the thing Martov and Lenin, and others, but who cares? Since they are not leaders in glorious revolution, Martov wasn't, but that was because of a split in 19... Tangent over. The League of Struggle for the Emancipation of the Working Class. Now, I mean, this is not a big organization. Its leadership is made up of 7 to 9, depending on the time. And that's not good enough. So, they must form a bigger union. Luckily, there's a lot of other parties going around. The Social Democrats, they don't have fun with them. That's interesting. They'll come up later. Well, not in this episode, but in the next. But there's another party. I mean, where would you want to go with Martov, Lenin, both Jews? Okay, another tangent, but this one's important. Lenin, did he know he was a Jew? As I alluded to in the teaser trailer for this episode. Okay, there's much scholarly debate on this. I am not a professional historian. I am barely an amateur historian. I'm mostly just a kid with some costumes who can use the internet. But I believe, in my personal opinion, and I'm not the only one, that Lenin did know he was Jewish. His sister would find out that their mother was half Jewish. Why would she hide this from them? I have no idea. His father, who converted, put them through Catholic school and Christian school, though other people like Kamenev went through Christian schools because they were just the ones around at the time. I mean, there were Jewish schools, but they were not professional. And by schools, I mean gymnasiums. By gymnasiums, I mean tangent over. So, yes, where do they go to? The Jewish Bund. The Jewish Bund is the biggest socialist organization at the time. And it isn't just in Russia. Well, actually, it is, but Russia is an empire at this time. There are Jews from Poland, Ukraine, the Baltic, all formed together, united by their Judaism into the Jewish Bund. Now, the Jewish Bund is complicated. I will not be fully going into it, but this will be kind of, I want to say, make up the mid to lower level management. In fact, what do you form when the League of Struggle for the Emancipation of the Working Class and the Bund and like 50,000 other minor factions get together? The RSDLP, Russian Socialist Democratic Labor Party. And, well, they will do congresses and conferences, and oh my god, it's insane. Literally was reading the transcripts for all of them. It took me forever. But the first Congress, the Bund makes up 1/3, and Congress is 3 people. Was not, it isn't insane. Now, who comes along with this? But I want to talk about Leon Trotsky here. I mean, I always do, but you know. He fits in this story here. You see, Trotsky wasn't always a Marxist. He actually was, he was always left-wing. He was always... Okay, socialism and Marxism are 2 different things. I mean, there's many reasons why, but I said I'd be here forever. And as you can hear, the rain makes it, I have short time before my oil lamp goes out, and I can't speak, so I must continue. He wasn't always Marxist. He went from being a labor unionist to a Marxist. Why did he do that? Well, you see, Leon Trotsky is not his real name. In fact, none of these names are their real names. We don't know what all of their names are. We do know Lenin's, and we do know Trotsky's. He was Lev Bronstein. Now, here's a tangent that I wanted to go on. There's many thoughts on Trotsky and his name, Leon Trotsky, not Lev Bronstein, which is what he was born into why. Now, we don't know fully why, but we know why, with some of the whys, why not. People say, was he concealed he was Jewish? It wasn't. He actually did a lot to show off, not show off he was Jewish, but did a lot with the Jews and the Bundists. Some say it was in honor of a brutal man. This is mostly right-wing opposition. By the way, right-wing used very liberally in this. Who's right-wing? I'm going to do right-wing in proportional to center, center being Lenin. So Stalin will later be right-wing, but he's not important now because things are good. Trotsky's name comes from a guard, we know that, out of prison. Now, we don't know much about it, and we don't know why. My personal theory, which is a little goofy and definitely shows my amateurness, it was cool. And he did escape from that in a haybeck, no less. But there was that. In fact, he was actually an exile during this, so he had to run a while. And that's when Irska was the paper for the RSDLP. Now, RSDLP had loose membership at this time. This is something Lenin didn't like, something Martov did like. It was insane. But Trotsky started identifying them. He identified with the Irska faction, which would be more filled with Lenin. But, strangely enough, he was first with Martov. Or was he? Because it's time for us to get to the Second Congress, and this is where things start getting sad. By sad, I mean different. By different, I'm not even going to go on that tangent because it would take me 1,000 years just to even cycle back. What happened at the Second Congress? Well, it actually goes back to this problem with membership. You see, Lenin, he was an idealist, to put it in the best way. He was ideologically insane. Insane. This is coming from a Trotskyist. How do I put this lightly? He wanted people to follow party line. He wanted people to not deviate much from party. He wanted to keep this sincere. In fact, while I can't get a direct quote from him on this, mostly because of later revisionist stuff and the fact Marx doesn't have all of this, just said anyway, say, we are not farmers, we are professional politicians. Part of Leninism is the need for I don't want to use Marxist terminology, but imagine like professionals working to help advance it before the peasantries can take off on their own. Oh God, I already need a drink. That's good underage vodka. So the Second Congress split. Martov and the Mensheviks were 100% against steady. We are an inclusive party. We don't need this. By the way, they're all part of the Irska faction because there were other factions that were even less socialist than this, and Irska, being the newspaper, was important. So here's a fun thing. You can start seeing patterns in Soviet history, especially earlier Soviet history. And I want you to look at two patterns. Those who controlled newspapers controlled power. First with Irska and later Pravda. Second, Russians power share in threes. But in the end, one of them takes over. And that's where we get here first one. Actually, two ways. There are SDLP. We're talking about the Second Congress. Okay. Where do we get to see our first troika? That's the Russian word for triumvirate, relating back to the Roman Republic and with Julius Caesar and Crassus and Pompey. And it refers to power sharing of three. As you're probably getting tired of me being repetitive of this. The Bund, the Mensheviks, which comes from minority because during some crazy politicians' shenanigans later, that will be their name from. And Bolsheviks, majority. Same crazy shenanigans back in the future, but that's not for right now. What's important is they can't agree. Martov wants to keep it food. I don't have the direct definitions in front of me, but Martov said if you pay your dues and you work towards the advancement of the party, that's all good. Lenin said you must follow the party. If you're part of this party, you agreed with us, you have to keep on agreeing with us. It's split. But then, you can't really, it's a vote. I mean, besides abstentions, which are just as good as no votes to Lenin, you can't really be for or against. So, Jews disagree, and of course they do. But here's a more interesting thing. this Russian Social Democratic Party is not legal in Russia. So this isn't, it's not in English, but that's where a lot of the people tangent over. Oh, so I'll never be able to get through this. When it is in England, Trotsky goes there. You see, he's having problems with the politics. And here's tangent I actually want to talk about. Parvus. If you've heard that name before, it's not because of good reasons. He was a Jewish banker, but also a revolutionary. He worked and helped deal with a lot of Trotsky's ideology, including permanent revolution. And this is a term I hear misused so often that I'm going to definitely need to talk about it here. It will drive me insane. But first, underage vodka. That's good Soviet. Permanent revolution. This means a lot of different things. Either is it the continuation of the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is another term that is misused. I might have to do an entire episode on just Marxist terminology. But what is to be done? Not the pamphlet or newspaper and Pravda. I'm not getting into that. But the thing. We're going to see this later play out between Trotsky and Stalin, but Trotsky does not believe the revolution, the communist revolution, can happen just in one place. It has to happen everywhere or nowhere. And he will, at first, be with Martov and later with Lenin, but he can be thought of a third way. Oh, come on, can you hear the Soviet weather? But don't worry, I'm back now. So Trotsky, third wave. Yes, I know it gets confusing. Is this another troika? No, it isn't. Trotsky actually isn't very powerful right now, though he soon will be. Because after all of this, after Parvus, actually, this has nothing to do with our story, but I kind of love Parvus. What was his downfall? Why isn't he thought of so highly now? You see, this is an amazing story, and that's something that's very confusing. Turns out, people were just willing to drop lawsuits to handle things in their party. See, Parvus was part of a communist party, not in Russia, but later on. There was a playwright in this party because many artists are actually secretly communists. You can look it up. It's a very fun and interesting activity. Helen Keller, secretly a socialist. Who would have thought? But Parvus had agreed in some way to help produce this. The other person said, fine, just here's my percentage of money. Parvus didn't hand that money over. Now, the person was getting ready to sue in the party that they were both part of, said, no, let's handle this in between us. And they just agreed. And in fact, Parvus lost. The party had no legal binding. But he handed it over anyways. Actually kind of amazes me that he would just do that. But now, tangent over. So here we are, Second Congress. There's a split. Let's talk about the Third Congress. Now, this is actually a hard term to use because was there a third party Congress? Technically. There were two. Or was there one conference and one Congress? Terminology is weird. Very, very, very weird. The Bolsheviks ran the Third Congress, not the RSDLP. How? Because there was a meeting with the Menshevik faction during this time in Geneva. So, Lenin and the Bolsheviks actually legally called within the party's structure this Congress. And some Mensheviks showed up, giving credence to it. Why? Because the factions are very loose right now. It won't be so much later, but right now. Bolsheviks would vote for and against. Joseph Stalin would vote against Lenin. Kamenev and Zinoviev would vote against Lenin. In fact, they would vote against Lenin quite a bit, despite Zinoviev and Kamenev. I'm going to be honest here. I don't like them, and I think they were slightly power hungry. And I would very much refer to them as Lenin's secretaries. I mean, they did other things that were much more than that. This is very degrading, but yes, they were kind of always trying to play second fiddle and then swoop in this right time. But this is another tangent. Like all other tangents, it needs to be over. So the Third Congress is convened, and the Bolsheviks, in majority, pass a ton of legislation. And by, I mean not legislation, party memos, officials, even they had elections for like members of their own inter-Congress, Politburo, Bureau. Fun fact, communists love bureaucracy. I'm not sure if you knew that, but they do, and they have like 5 different levels. And if you go on Wikipedia, you will get lost, I assure you. Now here's where I want to introduce you to. This man was going by the name Koda at the time, and he and Lenin performed one of the biggest bank robberies in Russian history. In fact, I think it might currently be the biggest if you include inflation. So, this man is Georgian born, and the Russian bank is just transporting gold through Georgia for some reason. There's actually no legitimate reason. I'm just adding some comedic flair here. So this man runs a group of outlaws, and they actually might go by the name Outlaws. We don't know. This will be later changed when this random Georgian boy, I don't even bother remember what the name of, later gets some like minor position of power. And he actually has a pretty weird plan. He's first going to throw grenades at them, out this wagon train of gold. Then he and his buddies, armed with mostly just pistols, will storm in, steal the gold, and give a lot of this to the party. Though they will keep some from themselves, though that's not part of the plan. I mean, it's part of their plan, of course. Just one problem. The grenades work. Now you might be saying, how's this a problem? Grenades have smoke after them, and it turns out when the Tsar sent people with a bunch of his gold, he kind of just didn't, not give them guns. So in the confusion, many civilians will be killed and wounded. Now Lenin and this Georgian would try to distance themselves, but it's not looking good for them. It will later be actually commended as a glorious proletarian revolution before the glorious proletarian revolution, for the glorious patriotic war. Communists also love coming up with 50 different names for the same thing. But for now, they want to keep their distance from this. But luckily, we have more interconflict because, you see, the Tsar is dead and there's a new Tsar imperialist in charge. And he has a coronation. And at these coronations, they have parties for both the proletariat and bourgeois, my comrades. And unfortunately, the planners for his party for the proletariat didn't include enough alcohol and food. And people got angry, and they, the Tsars, as usual, ineffective during this time. And they wished to voice their disagreement with him, if I am to put it. Minor right. No one told the guards not to fire, and, they asked, should we fire, and he said, I have better things to do than, rule my country. I was trying to see what people disliked him, of course. So they opened fire. This is called Bloody Sunday, not to get confused with the other 50,000 different Bloody Sundays. And this led to the 1905 revolution. And if I may just go through what each leader did with the 1905 revolution. Lenin is in exile, but he supports this revolution because communism supports all revolutions, naturally. And he accidentally uses some of the wrong language. Terminology is very important to communists and his comrades. So the Mensheviks call him no longer socialist, despite earlier calling him too communist. By the way, those are two different things, two different meanings, and I cannot, for the life of me, go into it right now, but I will, I promise. So, I find this funny, that's the only reason I'm including it. But I want to also know one thing. Martov and Lenin are friends. LSD, PLR. Shoot, I screwed up that name. But it's an ineffective institution. RSD, LP, combined with the Jewish Bund and their major parties, but also Martov and Lenin, the organization. They will be friends until each die. In fact, if I may just talk about some of the things Lenin had to say about Martov, he said Martov had the distinctive ability of being likable. In fact, if you look up at any picture of Martov, you will see this man had style. They're friends, they like each other, and even during the split, they kind of want to reconnect. But here's another thing. Lenin has a pretty firm grip on the Bolshevik faction. That's why the Bolshevik faction is there. They want the leaders of the party to have a tight grip on the people. Martov doesn't. He leads the Mensheviks kind of like, how do I put this? The Queen leads England. He's a figurehead, and in the end, not everyone votes with him. That's part of what I was saying earlier, that the factions don't really mean anything. So I'm about to go into something very confusing. The remaining congresses, Pravda. So first, underage vodka. Please get me through this. I can taste the non-alcohol. Pravda. Why is this important? Okay. As I said, newspapers matter. Pravda started off as, just some of the things the communists did on the side, but would later become more and more important. Pravda, when was it started? 1912. When did the major people join? 1908 or before. How is this possible? Because Pravda is both state newspaper and private. Currently it's private. Doesn't actually even have anything to do with the Russian Communist Party. But before it became, as what many people call the central organ of the party, it was a private newspaper, and they invited Trotsky to do this. He started writing for Pravda pretty well. When he joined, is actually 1908, but there was acceptance in 1907, and he was doing stuff for it. In fact, all of our guys, except Martov, I'm pretty sure, would become editors at one point of Pravda. And some other important people, like I'm pretty sure that Georgian person Tiflis would become, a writer of Pravda, but who really cares about him at this point? So I want to now talk to you about the Fourth Congress, and it's a doozy. You see, let's first go back to the Third Congress. Well, who was there? Kamenev was there. Zininov was there. In fact, at this point, you can pretty much just think of anything Lenin does, Zininov is there right there. He's actually his aide-de-camp. And who's Kamenev? Zininov's boy. Also, fun fact, Kamenev and Trotsky are related. You see, Lev Bronstein had a sister, Olga Bronstein, who would later be known as Olga Kamenev. You see, yeah, that's right, they're brothers-in-law. This will make the further betrayal furthermore very, very annoying. But if I might go back to the Third Congress, Kamenev was there, Zininov was there, Trotsky, sort of there. But sort of not. Was he there in person? I don't know. A lot of these things were actually held in secret. In fact, a later conference would be held so in secret, we don't even know where they met. But what I do know is the Fourth Congress is very important because Zininov, Kamenev, Lenin, who stomped at the Third Congress, would be forced to formally reconcile the Mensheviks and Bolsheviks split despite the fact there was no formal split, which, of course, as you know, means nothing actually changed. They were still very divided. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Not here about the fourth. I mean, we are. But let's talk about the Fifth Congress. Bolsheviks are supreme. In fact, after this official split, you'll have the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks running as two separate parties. Though Martov and Lenin are still friends and will actually do a lot together. So the Fifth Congress, Bolsheviks are supreme. And some, people show up, not very important, just like a bunch of the Central Committee who would soon take power. But, glorious revolution can wait, comrade. I will be waiting for a long time before it happens again. So, Sixth Congress. This is actually not one of the important ones, but I just want you to know, Pravda now becomes an official, as they call it, central organ of the party. But that's not what's important. I mean, it is important, it's just not what's happening. Prague Conference. Full breakaway. There is nothing further. There's no hope about reconciliation. In fact, now, this is unconfirmed, but Zinoviev and Kamenev set up the Prague Conference as a means to reunite the factions. Despite the fact neither one of them wanted to reunite the factions because they actually wanted the Georgian boy from the Tiflis train robbery to take power. Well, not take power. They didn't want him to take power. They wanted to form their own troika in front of the troika of the currently three parties, the Bund, who, actually I want to go back a little bit. The Bund is advocating for a Jewish autonomous state, or Jewish autonomous oblast, which will later be done by, I don't know, I think the Georgian boy would have something important in this, but he would later create an actual Jewish autonomous oblast, and thanks to getting and securing a lot of this support from the Jews. And this is what the Bund wanted. This was later tabled because, we don't allow nationalism in socialist conferences, but they also had their own bill that wanted people to speak the language. And here's a fun fact. Hebrew is not a socialist language. Yiddish, now, that's the people's language. Hebrew is for the elites. They're for those Torah scholars. Real proletariat brothers speak Yiddish. So they wanted each people to be able to speak their language, or Yiddish for their case. This was voted down. Then someone from the Stan countries, I know there's many different, I know they're very different. I know if I said it over there, I'd be shot by all of them at the same time, and they would then argue over who did it. But I'm just going to label them all together as the Stan countries, since they aren't even separate countries yet. They came up with the exact same resolution, and it passed. Now, I'm not saying there's inter-party anti-Semitism. What I'm saying is they know there's anti-Semitism around them. So I believe they did this to keep up with their proletariat brothers who might not like the Jews the most, despite the fact they are proletariat brothers and are obviously joined in the common struggle. So, Prague Conference, Georgian man who isn't even worth mentioning gains a little bit of power, and then Zinoviev consolidate, full breakaway from Mensheviks. 1912 is probably going to be the worst year of this decade. Or best decade, because I am obviously full Bolshevik. You hear that, KGB agent? Full supporter of Soviet Union and detractor of Trotsky usurpers. I think he bought it. Turns out, not worst year of the decade, because 1914 was around, and so do the men off to the trenches. Yes, World War I starts. But where are all these people? Lenin is in Switzerland. On a nice vacation? No. Well, I mean, he was living pretty nice. You see, he was kind of a celebrity. Socialists were detractors, but they were also kind of suave. That's kind of their thing here. That's kind of the image of what he wanted to present it. So he lived in a pretty nice place off of Zurich in Switzerland. That isn't where he started, but that's where he ended up. And there he wrote The Highest Stage of Capitalism. Fun fact, I did a book report on this. The teacher was quite surprised. Now, where was Trotsky? Well, just the second and third international conferences, where he was doing a lot of work for ending the war. And by work, I mean mostly proclamations. The socialists were still technically illegal here. And for anyone who says that Trotsky was ashamed of his Jewish past, right now he's writing for a Yiddish newspaper. Where was Kamenev? Well, he actually didn't flee with Zinoviev and Lenin, which is surprising, because he's Kamenev and also, a secretary. He is exiled, forced to denounce Lenin, though later on we don't know if this was forced. I'm assuming it's forced due to numerous writings from other people, which I do find credible, though it's possible he might have actually believed it, is arrested and then later exiled. Synonyms with Lenin, possibly transcribing the book, The Highest Stage of Capitalism. Where's Martov? Yeah, well, he's actually just a village away from Lenin, but he's doing other work within the Menshevik factions, trying to, centralize leadership. That is hard to oppose, but things happen anyways. Man, things are looking pretty grim for Russia. But now it's time for the revolution, which means I'm leaving. But I'm not. This is the February Revolution. It actually happens in March. And we're going to have to first tangent. I'm not even sure if I'll call it tangent. More like fun story, because it actually fully applies to this. Trotsky is currently in the West, and he's writing a Yiddish newspaper. He hears that there's a revolution going on in Russia, and he says, oh boy, I want to be a part of that. And he gets on a cruise liner, he's going through Halifax, and the British say, yeah, we're not letting you, Russia's our ally. So they stop and detain him. Trotsky's a Russian citizen. This looks very embarrassing to Russia. So Russia asks the British to let go of a revolutionary who's trying to start a revolution in Russia. I don't think this actually ever became a huge affair for anyone, but I must say I think this is pretty embarrassing. I think it's very funny because this would later definitely come back to bite the Russians. But, you know what? Who am I to judge a defunct and, in the end, useless government? I mean, besides an amateur historian. Martov. He returns actually after this revolution, actually in the same train as Lenin, in Lenin's Steel Train, which is a very creative name. Really, historians, you couldn't have come up with something better. But, you see, after the February Revolution, the Tsar is deposed. The Tsardom ends, and is replaced with the Kerensky government, named after the presumptive leader, Alexander Kerensky. And Martov does not want the Mensheviks to unite with him, because despite all of this, Martov is a leftist. He's even on the left of the Mensheviks. But he's too late. Then he tries to work with Lenin, but Lenin is done with him. Lenin returns on his own steel train, of course, with, Zinoviev and Dove. And he gives a speech upon arrival, and also the April thesis, which I actually want to read a transcript of. In our attitude towards war, which under the new provisional government of Lvov and Co., which remains on Russia's part of a predatory imperialist war owing to the capitalist nature, that government, not the slightest concession to revolutionary defensism, is permissible. Pretty much what he's saying is, I don't care if the Tsar is gone, you're capitalist, I'm not okay with this.
Let's hear what our boy Kamenev is, who is, and in my opinion, worse than Zinoviev. Well, there's the Georgian boy and his friend, and they're still there, though doing their own illegal things. And they form a troika. Yeah. Then they take over Pravda. Yeah. And Kamenev actually first goes against the April thesis. He says, when army faces army, it'd be the most insane policy to suggest to one of those armies to lay down its arms and go home. That would not be a policy of peace, but a policy of slavery, which would be directly discussed by a free people. Yeah, he starts supporting the Trotsky government. But then London shows up and pretty much says, well, I'm in charge here, and Kamenev says, yeah. Now, I want to talk to you about something that's commonly misunderstood. It's called the July Days, and it's an armed conflict, which means I'm done here. Well, actually, I'm not, because I'd even say revolution, because this is more like gang violence. Now, I don't think it was organized. We don't know if it was. We don't know what role the leadership of the Bolsheviks took in. But pretty much, the Bolsheviks are setting up newspapers left and right. And the Trotsky government, well, having newspapers saying they're imperialists, stop the war, it's not good for morale. So they keep on shutting them down. But the Bolsheviks aren't very happy about this. So some of their own men take it upon themselves to defend these areas with force if necessary. And this springs up for a back and forth called the July Days. There are major skirmishes. I think the Georgian boy might have a lot to deal with this, but I can't prove it because I think some Georgian boy probably erased the files. I have no idea how he did it. I don't even think he's going to be that important. And, well, let me just go through the aftermath. Lenin flees to Finland. By the way, Lenin earlier set up major Bolshevik action in Finland, which would later be important. Actually, won't go into this in the next episode. Well, I might. But the Finnish will actually have their own civil war. And it will be very brutal, and a lot of it owes to the fact that Lenin was working to start the revolution there. But here's another fun tangent. The difference between a revolution and a civil war, as far as I know, is a revolution succeeded, the civil war failed or is ongoing. The American Revolution, we won. We overthrew the monarchy. The American Civil War, well, the South didn't win, despite current politics showing otherwise. But there will be the Finnish Civil War, very brutal, and that owes a lot to this. Leon Trotsky will be arrested, and before this, he will actually be showing a lot of the Bolshevik ideology. He starts coming around to Lenin, not because he actually fully agrees with him, but because he thinks it is the best way forward. Because, you see, Trotsky, he is a realist. He, in the end, wants further things than even Lenin, but he is willing to, I wouldn't say go down, but compromise to make sure those things happen. Zinoviev actually hides with Lenin in Finland because he's a secretary, and Kamenev is arrested. Now, some things start happening. First, the Kornilov affair. You see, there was a leader of the Cossack generals. The Cossacks are an ethnic group, which you can kind of think Mongol-like. They raid banditries, but they're also their own ethnic group, but they make most of their money through raiding. You can kind of think about how the Romani, or gypsies, though gypsies is kind of a slur. I don't know actually a lot about that. I should do more research into it. Like, we all think of them having a specific trade, they're thieves, but they're actually an ethnic group and they could be presidents, they could be leaders. They don't all have to be swindlers as we think of them. But the Cossacks, at this moment, I'd say 95% of their money came from theft. And the Russians, in times of need, relied on them because they're effective fighters. But Kornilov is now going to march on to St. Petersburg, or Petrograd as it's known right now, because Russians love changing names. Just ask Volgograd and what was it called before? Oh, never mind. He marches on Petrograd, and all of the Kerensky's government forces are actually off, fighting against the Germans. So who's there? Well, luckily, our, I wouldn't say hero, but one of our main characters, Trotsky, set up the Petrograd Soviet. This is a military group who's armed, and they are ready to fight off, and they're ready to fight off Kornilov, because if Kornilov comes in there, it's over for them also. And there's just one problem. Governments really don't let their citizens carry, heavy power firearms. I mean, some of them have rifles or pistols, but, like, a lot of ammunition. They're not an army. So here, the government is panicking, and they go to the Petrograd Soviet and say, please help us. And the Petrograd Soviet says, okay. And they say, but we don't really have the ability, we don't have the means to do it. And they say, well, we have ammunition, we have warehouses. If we give you that, will you fight for us? And they say, of course. General Kornilov never gets to Petrograd. He is turned away before then. And this is actually after the Petrograd Soviet gets the ammunition and some of the weaponry. And no, they don't give it back. So the Kerensky government just armed a major opponent by accident. Do you see why I think they're useless? But I want to talk to you about something else. Calendars. Everyone's favorite thing to talk about. I'm going to be going off of the old system of the Julian calendar. The one we don't use. It's the one that makes the February revolution happen in February and not in reality March. Because on October 10th, in a 10-2 vote, the Central Committee votes that armed revolution is the only way. The Central Committee of the Bolsheviks, not the Central Committee of the Mensheviks, but much like history, I'm forgetting Markov. Who are the two that voted against? You'll never guess. Kamenev and Zinoviev, best buds, possible lovers, but most of all, useless. They voted against. Even that Georgian kid voted for it. But what is that? I think I hear the revolution. Yes, things are happening. And I think it's nearing midnight on October 24th. Okay. Now, I want to talk to you guys personally. Some Yushanka hair right there. Sure. I've had a lot of fun doing this. And I want to do other things. But, I mean, I don't have, all of the ideas. So, I want to ask you, what should I do? With your own things, or vote on some of mine? Maybe you want to hear me discuss what I think ISIS elementary school would look like. Or the history of the Zulus, if you have been paying way too much attention to me. Well, actually, you're going to need to come up with different ones. Because and this is true, I'm planning on doing both already. Yes. I want to, in an embrace of whatever crazy concoction this is, we'll do a history of the Zulus up until the end of their kingdom, along with some comedic videos. But if you want me to do other things, history that you're interested in, or weird crazy things you would want to hear the equivalency of a psychopath's ideas on, just tell me. If enough people want it, I'll definitely do it. If I think it's a good idea and no one else wants it, I'll still probably do it. I have time on my hands.